Let's get going. Let's talk about giving trends. So, uh, there we go. So in 2023, 2024, I should say, uh, overall charitable giving reached a record of $592 billion. That's not to churches alone. That is charitable giving in the United States. And that is up 6% year over year than in 23. When adjusted for inflation, it's about 3%. But total charitable giving has increased or stayed flat as far as in current dollars for most years since 1984. So we have been on an upward trend for 40 years. Recent years have seen a slowdown post 2021, and we know that there's many factors to that. But total giving annualized on average, that rate of change is about 2.7%. So we know that charitable giving is an area that is growing as it relates to the church, right? Or rather, as it relates to donors, I should say. Individuals account for 392 billion in 24. That in and of itself is an 8.2% increase, or 5.1 when adjusted for inflation. That represents 66%. So individuals, people donating to charitable causes account for 66% of all charitable giving. How that relates to you as the church, right? That accounts for 23% of total charitable giving is going to faith-based organizations, right? That's $146 billion in 2024 went to faith-based organizations. We'll update this in January or whenever the numbers come out for 25. But we're seeing similar trends so far this year. You can see right now, faith-based giving, it has been and continues to be the largest piece of the pie. Giving to religious organizations receives the highest total donations than any other charitable subsector, right? If we go back to that previous pie chart, right? There's so many different areas that people can give to as far as charitable giving is concerned. And religious organizations, faith-based organizations still account for the largest piece. So these are some good things to note, right? We have been on this 40-year upward trajectory. Faith-based organizations still account for the largest sector in which charitable giving comes through. But it's not all roses. There's more to this story. And so the overall giving, or I should say, while overall giving is growing, giving to faith-based organizations is actually stagnating, right? So year over year, giving to religious organizations has increased just shy of 2% in 24. But when we adjust that for inflation, it's actually declined by 1%. Not a huge number by any means, but it is the only subsector in which charitable giving has gone down. Additionally, while again, the total amount has been on this upward trend since 84, you can see there's a drastic difference between where money was going in 84 versus 2024, right? In 1984, almost 62% of all charitable giving in the United States was going to faith-based organizations. We now see around 23%, right? And as culture has shifted, as it's evolved, as generations have become more outward looking, potentially more, how would I say this, focused on the nonprofit sector, if you will, there's a lot more opportunity and there's different places for people to engage in charitable donations. Additionally, right, there's been economic headwinds that I believe everyone here today can identify with, right? Since 2020, overall inflation is up 20%. And while we saw that peak in 2022, it's still been historically high. There's been major changes to the tax code, and then obviously tariffs and inflation, as mentioned. So there have been and there continue to be economic headwinds, which are also influencing these shifts. Now, the second piece of this is that there's also a shift, not just in the why or the what, but the who. There's a shift in who is giving. There's been a decrease in median household giving. So from 21 to 24, the median household giving decreased by 34%. So on average, it was $910. It has decreased to $600. Furthermore, and this is true not just for churches or religious organizations, but any charitable org has been really increasing dependency on the top 1% of donors. Median giving by the top 1% has increased by 47%. And churches now depend on that to give 21% or to get 21% of their annual giving. And then just as far as like the drop in everyday donors, our dependence on high net worth individuals may be masking this sort of disengagement that we're seeing from the everyday donor. Part of that is definitely because there's definitely some generational differences, right? We're growing more dependent on these larger givers as we're also progressing through a natural shift on that who is giving, right? As we look toward the future here with millennials, with Gen Z sort of taking over as the primary giver, we're going to actually need more givers. And our friends at Mortarstone provided some data for us here. Interesting thing, right? For one baby boomer who is a donor, it requires 3.4 millennials to equal their giving, right? Additionally, for Gen Z, to replace a boomer donor in your church requires 10 Gen Z donors. And we know that there's shifts coming. So let's talk about what we can do. I think one thing to note, right? When we look at that 40-year trend, there's been economic factors, economic downturns that we can't forget, right? That have happened historically. And what is encouraging is that people will give regardless of the macroeconomic factors, right? Over the last 40 years, giving has remained constant despite these external factors. And this is, I would say, encouraging to a degree, right? Disposable income, giving has remained steady at around 2% of disposable income, and it's never gone lower than 1.8% and never higher than 2.3% on average. So that sort of like 2% average has stayed strong through many economic moments in our history. And then when talking about GDP, right, when comparing against gross domestic product, charitable giving, again, has stayed steady around 2%. It's never really fallen again below that 1.6% and never rising above that 2.1%. So knowing that, let's talk about what we can do. And some of this might just be, well, Dave, obviously, but you'd be surprised. In my experience, having worked with quite literally thousands of churches, it's so important that we, as kingdom people, as people who are for growing the kingdom, that we actually make time for our congregants and our people to engage in this moment. The last 40 years have proven that individuals want to give, but they're also being asked. They're being asked by many more causes today versus years ago. And it's never been more critical for churches to be bold in their ask and not just be soliciting, if you will, and making your congregants feel like we're just asking for money, but share the impact and the change that their giving has made. Without evidence, your members, they may be looking elsewhere, right? They want to know that their dollars are making a visible difference. And I would love to hear, maybe in the chat from some of you, what are ways that you do this right now? Is this something that you are, maybe feeling challenged about? Is this something that you feel like your church doesn't do yet or doesn't do well, or something that we need to do more of? And I would just be encouraging, right? Like here at the church that I'm a part of out in Franklin, Tennessee. And if you know anything about Franklin, Tennessee, there's no shortage of churches in the area. But something I would say is fairly unique that we do in our non-denominational expression of faith. We actually do a liturgical reading as a congregation that we have as our team, our board of elders, and our leadership put together a moment for us where we stand and we'll hear from our pastor or whoever's leading that Sunday to encourage us in our giving. We'll share stories of faith, of breakthrough, and all of that. But we come together then as a congregation and make a liturgical recitation about why we give as a church and what God's word says. And that's something that's new for me personally, right? And I found that very encouraging, that I know that when I'm giving, it's reminding me not just, about like why we give, but where it's going and what it's going to do. And so my encouragement to you, pastor, in this room, be bold, teach the word, stay faithful. Don't fear whatever macroeconomics, cultural shifts at hand, but stay firm. And your people want to give. Know that God's people want to engage. I've done a lot of talking, Mariah. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat there right now that maybe we can jump to before I move on.
Yeah, let me check. I'm pretty sure you covered any of the questions. If anyone didn't see, I did drop the new link, the one that should work for the Cyber Monday deal. So if anyone didn't get that at the beginning of the webinar, I dropped the new link in there. So you should see that now. It looks like Roberta is saying, I would like to see a sample of that affirmation regarding giving.
Yeah.
Don't know if you want to speak to that.
Oh, absolutely. On a personal level, I'll drop my email here in the chat. Actually, I think, Mariah, you probably have my email. If you want to drop that email in, please, Roberta, feel free to just shoot me a quick email and I will get that for you.
Yeah, awesome. I think for the most part, though, you've covered any questions throughout the slides, so continue on.
Awesome. Thank you. So something that I think is actually really important, it's knowing your days. And what we mean by this is knowing your members. Like, when are your members most likely to give? Obviously, Sunday. Sunday is a time to give. The opportunity presents itself clearly when we're gathering. And it's still the most common day that we see people engaging in giving to their churches on the platform. But it's just sort of a reminder, right? Because of that, it's critical that we dedicate time in our services for this. It is, you don't have to take 15 minutes. It can be 2 to 3 minutes. Either way, it's a dedicated moment. It's a habit, right? 54% of all visits to our giving form happen on Sunday morning. And we are processing hundreds of thousands of transactions for churches every month. The second piece of that is mobile is critical. And we have been a mobile first company since day one. 81% of visitors to our giving form are coming through mobile. So whether that be through our free giving app, whether that be to the church's website, through a mobile browser, or through a custom application, or maybe even text giving, we have these different ways that people can give, and 81% of that is coming through a mobile device. So it's so important to remember, it's not just about the timing, but it's about how you're engaging those donors and making sure that you have those opportunities for them to do so on a Sunday. You can see here just sort of like a breakout. Typically speaking, 30% of total giving is coming through on that Sunday morning or Sunday in general. It stays pretty even across the week, except for you can see on Friday there's a bump to just shy of 16%. And so something just to note about that, right? What we've learned is that the 1st and 15th are also very important. This is typically speaking for most people on salary. This is many people get paid on the 1st and the 15th, or at the very least, they're getting paid every other Friday. So outside of Sunday, people are tending to give when they get paid. And it's part of their budgeting habits. I don't know what it's like for you all, but this is built into my budget. This is something that happens on Fridays when I get paid. So does my tithe go out. A lot of people engage this way. So it's really important to kind of remember that. And then just a side note, right? With holidays, you will tend to see more gifts, although maybe smaller donations overall. And I'm talking about Christmas, Easter, those kinds of holidays as well. Just a little bit more data to see here as it relates specifically to the 1st and the 15th. You can see when this is broken out across a 31-day month, those 2 days are higher than all the rest, the other 28 or 29, depending on which month we're talking about. So 1st and 15th is a really important thing. So what does that mean? Like, okay, you keep saying 1st and 15th. What's the point of that? Well, it's one of those things where, like, look, if you have a church newsletter, maybe when that newsletter goes out on the 1st, that weekly newsletter goes out on the 1st and the 15th, this is when we're talking about generosity. We're making that front and center. Maybe you are using a custom application. You can send a push notification to people who are using a custom app. Small groups, maybe that's when we talk about generosity, is that first week of the month or that middle of the month at your small groups. Whatever it may be, there's ways here in which you can bring generosity and giving front of mind for your people, not just on a Sunday morning. And it's important to remember these things and know these things, right? Because you've got so many things. If you're a pastor, a church admin, any kind of leader, you've got so many other things going on. Leading a church is more than a full-time job. And so this kind of data, this isn't the kind of thing that maybe you would know or you would think about, or like, why would I even bother to look at this? People come on Sunday. This is when we give our offerings, right? We'll just see here, there are trends and there are ways in which we can engage generosity at a deeper level. Just some other key days here to highlight, right? Highest number of donations come on Easter and Palm Sunday. Easter is 230% and Palm Sunday is 221% higher than the daily average. December 31st comes in third on that. It's 113% higher. Many people trying to get in their year-end giving for tax reasons. And then when it comes to donation volume, well, December 31st is the highest, right? On average, it's 340% higher. Again, with Palm Sunday, 154%, and then Easter. So sort of the reverse from the previous chart there. So these are really key, right? We know, especially with around Christmas, around Easter, these are really important dates just in general for the church on the church calendar. And then for our services, whether it be for events, inviting family, neighbors, friends, those kinds of things. But these are also opportunities, right, to engage new donors. And so know your days, right? December accounts for 11% of yearly giving. And so you've got December right around the corner right now. People are going to give more. And so making sure that you have the ability to engage these donors is going to be ever important because people are going to be looking to make these year-end charitable donations. And why not give it to the church, right? Know your givers. 16% of gifts equals 65% of the money. You can see this chart right here where we've kind of got this like squared off, right? The chart kind of goes down on the right-hand side, but this is actually accounting for 65% of the money. That goes back to kind of what I mentioned about churches relying on sort of your top 1% of donors. And so it's understanding who your givers are. One thing that is so key is to ensure that we are getting into, or rather, making sure that your church has the ability for donors to set up recurring gifts. And we're going to dive into that. But I believe we have some questions before we get into the recurring giving side of things. Mariah.
Yeah, thanks. I'll go ahead and make this public for others to see because maybe some people have questions about this as well. But Michael says, we stopped passing the plate in service as a result of COVID and never reinstituted it. I think that is an adverse effect on the in-service giving. We keep a basket in the back of church for people to drop offering, but I think passing the plate would help. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I can only speak personally, right? I think it's interesting. The church that I'm a part of here, we see about 200 attendees on a Sunday. We're a fairly young congregation. Can I say I'm young if I'm 40? Am I allowed to say that? Gosh.
Yeah, you can say that.
When I say that, 39, I'm 39. Okay.
You can say it.
But most people are, a lot of young families, most people are under 40, and we still pass buckets. And I watch that bucket go by almost weekly, and there's maybe one or two envelopes or gifts in there. And I asked my pastor about it, and his view was like, it sort of like affirms the moment still. Like there's still this sort of like participation. So from a personal perspective, I would be in agreement, because it also gives you that opportunity to essentially open up the moment, right? Because people have to do something. And I think if you put a basket at the back, right, people have to get up during a moment in the service. And people maybe don't want to disrupt the service to do that, right? So that would be my opinion.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Cool. And then we also have Jason who says, we are considering adding a giving kiosk. Are there any success stories from churches using a Tithely kiosk? Our goal is to better serve Gen Z since they tend to use cards and mobile payments instead of cash.
Yeah, I would say that with kiosk is something that is, some churches love it, but I wouldn't say it's key. You're especially your Gen Zers, this is their kiosk. This right here.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about having a place for them to go, it's about how can they engage in the moment. So mobile first, I don't know if you caught that at the beginning or close to the beginning, 81% of donations are coming through a mobile application or a mobile device, I should say. And so whether that be through the app, we, as do other platforms in the space, we're stepping into tap discs. So getting away from having hardware, but having an NFC disc attached to your chairs or pews, where someone can simply put their phone against it, kind of like Apple Pay, and it will pull up the ability to give right there. These are the kinds of things that we're actually seeing make more of an impact overall, and especially engaging with that younger generation.
Yeah. And I know you might have asked that question just today, but I'll answer speaking on behalf of Gen Z, that I also see a lot of success with that QR code. So if you're not utilizing that QR code and just throwing it up on the screen, I feel like I've seen more success stories of people with that younger generation than maybe that kiosk. So just something to keep in mind, Tithely generates a QR code for you. So if you're not using it and throwing it up on the screen, highly recommend doing that. It's easy for someone to just sit in the audience, the congregation, scan the QR code, and then give right there. So if that's not something you're utilizing already, highly recommend doing that.
That's a great call, Mariah.
Yeah, but thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And then the last question, at least right now, for Thomas is if the access to this webinar will you be able to get a copy? Yes. Anyone who registered for this webinar will get a recording of it. So will get access to that, Thomas. And then let's see. Let me check the other chat as well, not just the Q&A section. Charles says, do you see Venmo as a benefit along with e-giving? Do you want to address that at all?
Venmo, so e-giving, yes. Absolutely. Venmo specifically, platforms like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, you just want to make sure that it's right for the church. They come with a lot more complexities as far as reporting for taxation purposes, those kinds of things. I would encourage you that and say resoundingly yes. Online, mobile giving, your church needs it. That is something that is an absolute must. But I would encourage you to look into a church first platform, right? Venmo, apps like that, they're not built for churches. So
yeah, that's a great call out. And also all of our products work in tandem with one another, whereas Venmo, Dave kind of addressed that. It's a separate thing. It's not centered towards churches. So Dave would always recommend that you utilize something that's built for churches, meant for churches, with your guys' success in mind, whereas Venmo is probably not the best suited for churches. Yeah. Jane mentions, where do you suggest putting the QR code? Really anywhere, Jane. You can print it out on a piece of paper and put it in your foyer. You can throw it up on the screen. That's often what I recommend to people, just because it's easy for those in the congregation to just hold up their phone and scan it while it's on the screen if you have it. But you can put it in a news post or a newsletter. You can put it on your Facebook. It's a code that you're able to either download and print, or you can just copy and paste it somewhere else, even on your website. But it can really go anywhere. Just to answer that question. And then let's see. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. Love how everyone's being super active in the chat. It's awesome. Let's see. What are the average transaction costs for electronic donations? In the Tithely system for credit card or debit card transactions, it's 1.9% plus 30 cents.
2.9, Mariah. 2.9. Sorry, 2.9. I'll make sure. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. 2.9 plus 30 cents. And then is it 1% for?
Yeah, people can link up their bank accounts and do an ACH transfer directly for 1% plus 30 cents. So
perfect. So 2.9 plus 30 for card, bank is 1% plus 30 for those transactions.
And I know this wasn't asked just then, Mariah, but I would just highlight, right? So transaction fees on electronic payments, this is sort of, it is what it is, right? It's and one thing for Tithely, our transaction fees have never changed in our 10 years of doing business. They have remained constant. Our relationship with our processor has allowed for that to be the case. And the beauty of our company, I guess, there's a few others out there like this, but you don't ever have to worry about interacting with a processor. You're only ever going to work with a company that understands the church. And we've built products like within our giving platform, which allows your donors to cover the processing fee. So, just kind of brings us back to a point here where when we're building products, we are putting the church first, and we're trying to find ways to ensure that money is getting, every dollar given, that intended amount is getting to the church. So just something to note, and we see about 50 to 60% of donors covering fees on average. So it's a high engagement.
Yeah. And that's a great call out to Jeff in the chat, who's asking about the engagement from your congregation when it comes to paying those fees. Mm-hmm. There is also an option as well, which you may have said, Dave, but when you're setting up your giving form, there is that option to automatically have that option to cover the fees turned on. Of course, customers can switch that off, but we do see a lot of success with people leaving that toggle turned on. That way, we see a good amount of people engaging with that cover the fees option. So just to kind of address that question you, Jeff, in the chat. I think we've covered most of what they have in the chat. And if we stack up some more questions in the Q&A section, I'll let you know, Dave. But if you want to continue on, go for it.
Yeah, well, we're getting to the tail end here. So I've just got a few more slides to go through. We've been sitting here looking at this one here for a few minutes, right? And this is our sort of like fourth thing that we should know, right? Know your recurring. What this means is recurring donors. So if you are not using any kind of online giving platform, this is one of the key reasons you should be. And if you are using one, but you're not seeing a lot of recurring donors coming through, let's talk about that. On Tithely, about 29% of all gifts coming through are from recurring donations. So what that means is somebody has said, I get paid on the 1st and 15th, and I get paid, whatever it is, $3,000 every 2 weeks. I'm going to put in my donation of $300, and I'm going to set it up to auto debit every time I get paid. And so this is something that is like very important in the church world, is being able to have donors set up their recurring donations. It doesn't take away from the moment necessarily. I've heard feedback before. It's like, well, doesn't that take away from the moment when we give on Sundays? I mean, I guess you could make the argument, but we all know, and I know for myself, having been, I mentioned if you weren't here early in the webinar, I was a pastor. I was part of a pastoral team for almost 15 years in the Los Angeles area. And if people aren't at church, I would love to say they all gave when they came back double, but the reality is that they don't. And this is something that allows donors to stay engaged in their giving. So I would say and encourage you all here who do have it, talk about it. Let them know this is an option for them. And I think it's more important now, right? Let's look at some of these stats here. 50% of households who gave in 21, less than 50% of households who gave in 21 gave in 2024. Only 55% of visitors to the giving form, this is through Tithely, returned 3 months later. And then we see, generally speaking, a 5% in one-time, a drop of 5% in one-time gifts over the summer. And then giving volume tends to drop off after March, right? After Easter. And we don't really see a recovery until November as people, again, are moving into these holiday seasons. So it's really important that we find ways, yes, to encourage people to come back to give a second time, whether that be encouraging them to just make small weekly or monthly gifts, $5, $10, $50, right? This will build towards people becoming recurring givers. And at the core, right, you want to make sure that you have a way for people to do this, right? Having some kind of technology in place where a person can say, I'm going to set up my gift to come out once a month, twice a month, set those dates as you see them, because it's so important. And we've seen great success for churches who have really highlight that for their congregations. We now see around that 29-30% of all donations coming through the platform are actually recurring gifts. I don't want to spend too much time on this, to be perfectly honest with you, but I do think it's just something to point out, right? Because again, maybe we're not keeping this top of mind. Something that's very unique to North America, right, are the tax incentives. And so people give based on this, right? So there are changes coming. And for 25, due to those changes, right, that the standard deduction limits are changing, donors who plan to give a large gift in the next few years may be more motivated or inclined to do that now. So talking about year-end giving is going to be very, very important with this in mind. Secondly, next year, for your standard deduction filers, which are probably most of the people in the building, right, they're actually going to be able to claim more. And so these are the people that maybe are not regular givers. This maybe will incentivize you as leaders to be talking about this more and teaching on this more, and engaging people more, because what we do know, as we saw in earlier data sets, is that even through hard economic times or whatnot, we see giving remain consistent, right? People want to give. So teaching on that and understanding that, right, people now may be more incentivized to give because of these changes coming through. I see a question here. Are you going to make tracking pledges a feature on your giving platform? Well, good news is we have a pledge feature. Mariah, I don't know if you want to have anything more to say on that. I mean, yes.
Yes, we do have a pledge feature. What I'll do is I will drop a link to our help article in the chat if you'd like to read more up on our pledge campaigns. And if you have questions about the pledge campaign feature, feel free to reach out to our support team. They're going to be the best suited to answer your questions, any technical questions about it. But yeah, I'm going to drop the Help Center article and then as well the email for our support team if you have specific questions about it. But in short, yes, we have a pledge campaign feature.
Awesome. Keep it simple. It's not about features, right? Here's what we know for donors, and if you're building technology into your strategy, into how you approach giving, it's so important to simply keep it simple. Keep it easy. 75% of donors say convenience is the number one factor in their decision to give online. In the early days of Tithely, right, those were a lot of the conversations I was having directly with churches who hadn't embraced online giving yet. And very early, we saw a lot of success stories because what was realized kind of across the board, which was why the company was birthed in the first place, it kind of came out of a heart of being like, we're seeing these people asking for these things, and they're using these platforms like PayPal that are not built for churches. Let's give churches and church admins, not just the congregant, but the admin and the pastor, the tools that they need. And we saw it right away, right? There were people in the church that wanted to engage in giving, but even at that point, 8-9 years ago, people weren't carrying cash or check. And so it's no surprise that 75% of donors say convenience is the number one. It's their number one factor when they give online. So keeping it easy is so important. I already said keep it simple, but like what I mean by that, 74% of donors say speed, say security, and simplicity are the most helpful aspects of the online giving process, right? Not putting cash into an envelope or writing a check, but seeing that charge come through immediately, knowing it's a secure payment on a secure platform, and being, getting that that notification immediately, kind of like a receipt if you order something online. That simplicity gives confidence to your donors. And I think the other thing to just kind of like focus in on basic features, not foundational changes, right? The two most requested features that we get are about one-click donations. That's about 50% of the requests that we get from our customers, and automated reminders to give. So like understanding that there's basic things that your people need. This isn't a huge mountain to climb. This is about just providing simple, easy to use solutions that keep it simple and easy. How many more times can I say simple and easy, Mariah? Jeez. Being prepared, right? Being prepared for changes in how donors give. This kind of harkens back to some of that data we covered earlier, but there's going to be a shift towards retirement, right? 11,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day in 2024 through 2027. This is going to create, or at least has the potential to create, a pretty significant shift in how they give. And if you remember, it's 3 millennials for every 1 boomer and 10 Gen Zers for every baby boomer. So as they shift into retirement, we're going to see a shift in how they give. So understanding that, what that means, right? There's going to be qualified charitable distributions, right? And it's making sure that your people know this. Just because they retire doesn't mean they're retiring from church. So while many are retiring, they may be unaware of these tax advantages that they're given through their IRAs. I would also advise you, especially around your higher donors, right? Donor advised funds, or DAFs as they're called, are becoming much more commonplace for higher net worth individuals. There's an estimated $250 billion in DAFs. And this is a strong gifting vehicle that should be highlighted for your churches, right? Even if it's just one, their year-end distribution could be significant. And making sure that this is something that you are able to do and receive from a donor advised fund is so important as the culture shifts. The last one here, right? Stock and crypto. Some of you will be like, I can't believe they're talking about crypto on this thing. Well, you know what? I'll tell you this much. we're seeing these shifts again. And if I can highlight, go back to what I said about that top 1% of donors. There are usually, when you have a donor of a certain net worth or people who want to give charitably, maybe once or twice a year in a larger sum, some of these folks would be very much willing to give out of non-cash assets. But for churches, you've probably never even thought about this as an option, or what would we do? But there are platforms out there just like Tithely, and through our partnership with a platform called Given, we've made it easy for churches to accept these gifts and get the monetary value directly, right? There's high tax incentives for this, for donors. And so knowing that these new forms of giving, these are actually on the rise. We're seeing it more and more every single day. This is becoming part of the conversation. And, you know, this last week hasn't been an all-time high for the market by any means, but the markets have still been moving up. And crypto continues to gain share, especially around your younger people. A lot of people are investing in the crypto markets. And so giving yourselves the ability to accept gifts and receive the monetary value of these kinds of gifts is going to be so important over the next 3 to 5 years. So being prepared for change and understanding these things is going to be so important. The last thing I just kind of want to highlight for everyone here today, right? Like, from our perspective, right? What are we exploring? Because this isn't data that we're just sharing with you, but this is data for us that we think is really important for the church at large to know. These are trends that we think the church at large should be aware of, but this is also informing us, right? So at Tithely, what we're doing is like, we're asking the questions like, how can we make consistent giving easier for churches, right? So what we're looking at into our platform is building in things like backup payment methods to reduce failed recurring gifts, right? Sometimes cards go over the limit. Sometimes cards fail. They expire. So having those backup payment methods, opting into customizable reminders to give, right? Letting people know, like, we can set this up to automatically remind you that it's time to give. And then I've already mentioned tap to give. I see we have a question about our partnership with Given. Maybe is there more context to the question, or just, hey, what does that mean? Who is that? What is that?
I think they're just looking for like, who is that? What is that? Because it is not a lot of people are, at least from the chat, it doesn't sound like a lot of people are aware that we even had that partnership. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all and just kind of who they are, what they are.
Yeah, and Given is a really fantastic partner with Tithely. They are they're an online giving platform specifically for churches and nonprofits, but specifically in the area of non-cash assets, right? So stock, crypto, donor-advised fund distribution, things like that. And so we have a partnership with them where you can get access to their software and run it through your Tithely account, where donors can give these assets with no additional, subscription costs. It's included in the free giving platform. Now, there are fees based on the type, but they're from an industry standard, they're actually very reasonable. They're on the lower end, the lower side. I think for stock, it's like 3 or 4%. Same goes for crypto. But they have a really robust, they were kind of the first to do this. And James and his team at Given have been really great partners. We've known them for a lot of years. And so we're really excited about that partnership that we actually just cemented earlier this year. So if you do want to know more about that, we'd be happy to talk to you and provide you with some more information about that for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And then I will also put in the chat as well, we have a little kind of blurb about Given as well on our website. So I'll make sure to drop a link in the chat if anyone wants to read up more about Given.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, again, like, answering that question highlights this sort of next point, right? Is like, how can we respond to the changing of giving patterns and wealth transfers, right? That's going to be important for churches to understand that crypto and stock is an opportunity. And then having things like DAF and non-cash, the ability to accept DAF and non-cash asset donations is going to be so important. for churches moving forward in this generational shift. And again, reminder, these are questions we're asking as we develop our product. And then ultimately, like, how can we help donors stay engaged with their giving, right? So as we develop our giving platform, we're still mobile first. And how do we keep that front and center? And how do we give more insights, more granular summaries of people's giving not just admins, but donors themselves on the admin side, investing in AI, right? You've got all this data inside of Tithely. And we have a tool that we announced back at our live streamed event back in the summer called Tithely AI that's coming in. This is really going to be a tool to help you dive into the data as it comes in, because we see numbers, we see charts, but we want to help you guys get in under that hood and really see what's going on, identify trends. These are the things that it's not just about giving, it's really pastoral, right? Because what we do know, again, because of what we've been doing for the better part of a decade as a company, is when giving from a household or an individual begins to drop, that can be a leading indicator of a problem at home. Maybe it's a pastoral issue that needs to be addressed. Is that person not engaging? And so we know that giving is a big piece of that puzzle. And so we know that there's a lot of data in there that can support you. And that's it. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was interesting. I hope that you learned some things that going into this year-end season may impact your giving for end of year. If you have any, we've got a few minutes. I'd be happy to answer any more questions that we have. Mariah?
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the chat. It looks like someone's asking how secure is the church bank information when the QR code is shared with the public. Dave, you can speak to this if you want as well, but I can just clarify that it's just as secure as the regular giving form. Nothing about the QR code changes your giving link at all. It's just as secure. And we do have several resources. I know I keep pointing back to the Help Center, but we do our best to inform you guys well. So I have tons of resources on the security as far as just Tithely goes. But Dave, if you want to speak to that at all, you're welcome to.
Yeah. So the church's banking information is never publicly available to your donors. I should just say that, right? Like all a QR code is doing is it's taking you to either a form or a web page, right? It's a really fancy way of getting someone to click a link. And so this has no effect on any of your financials or anything like that. It's just driving the donor to the place where they can make the donation.
Yeah. Great call out. Awesome. And then Gretchen, yes, the chat will be visible in the recording as well. So you'll be able to see the links. Again, I'll clarify if you do have questions that maybe we didn't address in this webinar, you're more than welcome to reach out to our support team. That's just support@tithe.ly. So make sure if you have any specifics that you contact them. It looks like Keith is asking, I know this question is sensitive when it comes to technology, so answer as you will, Dave, but do you have any information on when Tithely Tap will be available to our customers? I know it's a sensitive question because it's technology, so
listen. Do I want to take the ire of our product team and make make promises?
Right.
Very, very soon. Like I wish I could tell you the day, but it's like very soon, Keith. Very soon we'll have information, hopefully this week, about what's happening.
Awesome. Yes. And if you're not already involved in all of our Tithely Next events, just going to make a plug for that as well. If you're not, already watching those, highly recommend doing that because that's where we share a lot of information about stuff that's in the pipeline.
Here's what I can say. Actually, maybe this will be helpful, right? Yeah. It's ready. There's logistics. There's logistics because it's hardware, and shipping hardware. We want to make sure that we're getting things to people as fast as possible, making the order process as easy as possible. So the actual ability is there. We've already got churches that have been a part of a pilot program that have been testing it. So we know that it works. And so we're now just getting all of the logistics together, which is why I'm really excited. And I think it's going to be here really soon, Keith. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And then we have just a couple more questions I'll address. And I know a few of these are more personal opinion, Dave, more than maybe facts. But Jim did ask if you have any data for increased giving when it comes to those face-to-face conversations when you're talking about giving with your donors? I know that this is more of a personal question, but I don't know if you could speak to that at all, or maybe what you've seen success in the past.
So just to clarify, like meaning like we're talking about it during our services on a Sunday.
Yeah, like we're speaking directly to you versus, just showing people the data.
There's no quantifiable data here. It would just be out of personal experience and understanding in talking to churches, right? And it's why we come back to this. Actually, this is not new for us when we talk about encouraging churches to talk about this, because it is one of those things. I have an anecdote from a very large church that I worked with a number of years ago, who had someone on their pastoral team who didn't want to talk about giving. They didn't want to talk about it from the stage. They felt like it was going to put a burden on their people. And so that's okay. They had discussions about it, and there was an individual who stepped in and said, "Hey, I'm going to teach on this, and I think this is why, and this is what we're going to do." They saw a 30% shift. That is one anecdotal question, and that is a very large church, right? I'm talking like thousands of people. It's still a really great anecdote. Yeah. I think it's so interesting, right? It's one of those things where we just know that it's people want to give, but they need to be reminded. There's so much happening in life. There's so many things going on that if they're not given the opportunity, are they going to hold it themselves to engage in it?
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I hope that addresses I saw that question kind of come up multiple times. So I hope that kind of addresses those questions that a couple of people were asking in the chat. But awesome. Unless you have anything else, Dave, I think we've pretty much covered all the questions in the chat. As always, thank you guys all for joining. We were so excited to have you here with us. I hope this was helpful to you guys. I'm seeing tons of people in the chat saying thanks so much for this information, and that they're going to pass it along to their teams, which we love to hear that. So yeah, unless you have anything else to share, Dave, I think we're good.
I just thank you everyone for showing up. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great rest of your year. And maybe we can serve you at Tithely at some point if you're not already part of our team. So thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you in the next one.